my name is Judy. Welcome to the Liberated Multitasker. So today I thought we'd make taco lasagna. Low carb, keto friendly, and absolutely delicious. Come join me. For this recipe, we're going to need 2 pots and a casserole dish. So I've cut my oven on, and the recipe calls for 1.5 pounds of ground beef. I'm just going to go ahead and use 2 pounds. When we had our beef processed, it's packaged 1 pound per package. So anytime a recipe calls for 1.5 pounds, I usually just go ahead and up it to 2 pounds. So I've salt and peppered the ground beef. I'm just going to chop that up and go ahead and get it to browning. Now while we're browning our meat, we're going to start on our cheese sauce. And our first step to that is to melt 4 tablespoons of butter. I have to say I believe this cheese sauce is the secret ingredient to this taco lasagna being so absolutely delicious. So I'm still just trying to get the meat browned, waiting for that butter to melt before we go on to our next step. And our next step is to add 2 cups of heavy cream. You'll want to whisk that together in the pot. You don't want it to boil. You just want to blend that very well. And I'm just whisking it together to make sure it's good and blended. Now I have a friend of mine, it's where I got this recipe, and she and her family do keto. And so she's always sharing keto-friendly recipes with me. She knows that we're doing low carb, and lots of times, not always, keto-friendly recipes are also low carb, or just require small adjustments to make them so. So we're finally making some progress on getting that meat browned. So now to my cheese sauce, I'm going to add 2 cups of shredded cheese and just whisk that together. Now the recipe calls for Mexican cheese. I'm just using half cheddar and half pepper jack. Those are 2 types of cheeses I just keep on hand at all times. So now we're just going to add a touch of Creole seasoning, and I prefer Joe Daddy's. I'm just going to whisk that all together till that cheese is good and melted. And at the point that it's good and melted, I'm going to cut that eye off, because we're not far from the layering process. My next step with this meat is to drain the fat. And how I normally do that is using paper towels. Some of these pots are really heavy, and so it's just easier for me to do it this way. It's a little tough on my wrist. Just a few more paper towels to go, and we'll be done draining the grease. So our next step is going to be to add some seasoning. We're going to use 1 pack of taco seasoning, and you want to prepare that according to the directions. And on the back of my directions, it calls for 3/4 cup of water. And so we're going to add that in. So we just want to mix this up really well to make sure the seasoning is incorporated throughout the meat. Now, in order to help this be a low-carb recipe, you need to choose your flour tortillas wisely. And if you're doing low carb, choose a low carb tortilla. These are 4 net carbs. I've heard there are some 0 net carb tortillas out there, so you may want to give those a try. Spray your pan with some cooking oil, cut your tortillas in half, and layer them. I used 12 tortillas. And so that means I'm using 4 tortillas per layer, because you're going to have 3 layers. You're going to put 1/3 of your meat mixture on top of the tortillas. You know, I was worried that this wasn't enough meat, but it works out perfectly. You're supposed to only use 1/3 of the meat mixture on this first layer. And I think I've used a little more because I keep thinking it's not quite enough. But it is. You just have to trust it. So I think I'm almost finally done adding meat to this first layer. And so our next step is going to be to add 1/3 of the cheese sauce. So I just find it easier to use this ladle. I use this ladle a lot when I'm canning. I've really enjoyed having those. You can add tomatoes now. I got this from the grocery store, but you can also use salsa or Rotel tomatoes or diced tomatoes. And just spread that evenly in your casserole dish. So now we do another layer of tortillas. Now we're going to add half of our remaining meat. And then we'll add half of our remaining cheese sauce. Now I did get this recipe from a friend, but I also found the exact same recipe on Pinterest, so I will link the Pinterest recipe. Just remember to make it a low-carb dish. You will want to use the low-carb or zero-carb tortillas. So now I'm doing my third and last layer. Now for the last layer of taco meat. Just going to spread that out fairly evenly. And then we're going to add the rest of the cheese sauce. This was a new recipe for us, and it was husband approved. Now we're not quite done yet. We're going to add 1 more cup of shredded cheese. Just sprinkle that on top. And we're going to put it in our oven long enough to just melt that cheese, which is going to be between 15 and 20 minutes. So I will bring you back when that cheese is all good and melted. Spoiler alert, this was absolutely delicious and is now one of the top 10 of our low-carb casserole dishes. It smells so good. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I hope to see you soon.